My daughter Vanessa inherited our house and $55 million the moment her mother took her last breath. Then she kicked me out into the freezing rain saying, "Go die somewhere else, Dad. You are useless now and the money is mine." 3 days later, the lawyer looked at her and laughed, asking, "Did you even read the will?" My daughter turned pale because she realized too late that she had just triggered a countdown that would destroy her life before I continue this story. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Bernard Blackwood. I am 72 years old, and for the last 40 years, people thought I was just a retired construction worker with bad knees and a simple pension. They saw me as the quiet man walking one step behind his wealthy wife, Catherine. They never asked where the money really came from, or why a simple contractor knew so much about reinforced steel and underground bunkers. They certainly never asked why I kept a burner phone inside the hollowed-out heel of my right boot. The rain at the cemetery was relentless, a cold gray sheet that soaked through my black suit. Within seconds, I sat in my wheelchair, my knuckles white as I gripped the armrests, staring at the hole in the ground where they were lowering Catherine. She was the only person who knew the truth about me, and now she was gone, leaving me alone in a nest of vipers. Vanessa stood under a large black umbrella, holding a handkerchief she was not using to wipe tears. She was using it to check her phone, looking at the time. Every 30 seconds, she was 35 years old, dressed in designer black silk that cost more than my first car, and she looked bored. "Wrap it up," she snapped at the funeral director, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We do not need the long version of the prayer. Time is money, and overtime is expensive." I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was not a hand of comfort. It was Todd, my son-in-law, a failed stockbroker with a gambling addiction and a smile that made me want to check my pockets. He was wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was the color of a bruise. "Let's go, Bernie," he said, using the nickname I hated. Catherine would have wanted us to celebrate her life, not stand here getting wet. Ceremony ended abruptly. The workers began to fill the grave with a haste that felt disrespectful, urged on by Vanessa's tapping foot. I wanted to stay. I wanted to say a proper goodbye to the woman who had been my anchor. But Todd grabbed the handles of my wheelchair and spun me around. "The car is this way," he said, pushing me toward the road. The wheels of the chair sank into the mud, making the ride jar and painful. I did not complain. I had learned a long time ago that complaints give your enemies information about your weaknesses, and right now my family was the enemy. We reached the curb where Catherine's vintage Range Rover was waiting. The engine was running, the heat blasting inside. I prepared myself to be lifted into the back seat. My joints were aching, the humidity making the old shrapnel wounds in my leg flare up, though I told everyone it was just arthritis. Todd opened the passenger door, but instead of helping me up, he whistled. A golden retriever bounded out of the back of the hearse and jumped into the front seat, shaking mud and water all over the leather interior. "Good boy, Buster," Todd cooed, patting the dog. I looked at him confused. The back seat was filled with floral arrangements, huge wreaths that Vanessa insisted on keeping because she could resell the silk flowers. "Todd, where am I supposed to sit?" I asked, my voice raspy from disuse. Todd looked at me, then at the car, then at Vanessa, who was already in the driver's seat, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. "Oh geez, Bernie," he said, scratching his head. "Looks like we are full. Buster gets carsick if he is in the back, and Vanessa does not want the flowers to get crushed. They are imported." "So what am I supposed to do, call an Uber?" Todd said, shrugging. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, stuffing it into my shirt pocket. Like I was a cheap stripper. "Take a premium, one, treat yourself." He slammed the door shut. Vanessa did not even look at me. She just floored the gas, spraying muddy water all over my legs as the Range Rover sped away, leaving me sitting in a wheelchair on the side of a desolate road. In the pouring rain, I did not scream, I did not cry. I watched the taillights disappear into the mist. I reached into my pocket, took out the $20 bill and carefully folded it, placing it in my wallet next to a picture of Catherine. 70 hours, I whispered to the rain. That is how long they have. I used my own phone to call a cab, not an Uber. I needed a driver who knew how to keep his mouth shut. The ride to the lake house took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of silence where I cataloged every slight, every insult, every moment of disrespect over the last 10 years. We pulled up to the driveway of the estate Catherine and I had bought 20 years ago. It was a beautiful, sprawling mansion overlooking the water, built with reinforced concrete walls that I had designed myself. It looked like a luxury home, but to me, it was a fortress. I paid the driver and rolled my wheelchair up the ramp to the front door. My key was in my hand, a heavy brass key that I had carried for 2 decades. I slid it into the lock and turned nothing. It did not turn. I tried again, jiggling it, thinking maybe the cold had seized the mechanism. Then I saw the digital keypad installed above the handle. It was glowing blue, brand new. The door opened, but not because of my key. Vanessa stood there holding a glass of champagne. She was dry, warm, and smiling, a smile that chilled me more than the rain. Code changed, Dad, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Facial recognition only, and guess whose face is not in the system? Vanessa let me in, I said calmly. I need to change. My clothes, I am freezing. No, she took a sip of her drink. I do not think so, see. Todd and I were talking on the way over, and we realized something. This house is mine now. The money is mine, $55 million, Dad. Do you have any idea how much that is? I know exactly how much it is, I said, because I was the one who put it there. You are just a guest here, Vanessa continued, ignoring me. A guest who has overstayed his welcome. You are a burden, Dad. You just sit in that chair and stare at the wall. You are useless. She snapped her fingers. Todd appeared from the hallway, dragging 2 large suitcases. My suitcases. He dragged them across the marble floor and heaved them out the door. They landed on the wet pavement with a heavy thud. One of them burst open, spilling my clothes into a puddle. There is your stuff, Todd said, grinning. Everything we thought you might need, your pills, your old sweaters, that picture of Mom you like so much. He tossed a framed photo onto the pile the glass shattered against, the concrete fracturing Catherine S. smiling face. Go die somewhere else, Dad. Vanessa said, her voice devoid of any emotion other than annoyance. Go find a nursing home or a shelter. I do not care. Just get off my property. But the will, I started to say. I read the will, she interrupted, cutting me off with a wave of her hand. I get everything. Assets, property, cash, all to Vanessa Blackwood. Your name is not even on the deed anymore. Mom knew you were incompetent. That is why she left it all to me now. Leave before I call the cops for trespassing. She stepped back and slammed the heavy oak door in my face. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. I sat there for a moment, staring at the closed door. The rain was heavier now, turning to sleet. I looked at my suitcases soaking in the mud. I looked at the shattered photo of Catherine. Most men my age would have broken down. They would have pounded on the door, begged for mercy, screamed for their daughter to have a heart. But I was not most men. I leaned forward and picked up the photo, shaking the broken glass off the image. I wiped Catherine's face with my thumb. I gave them a chance, Catherine, I whispered. I gave them a chance to be decent. I stood up out of the wheelchair. Yes, I could stand. My knees were bad, but they still worked. The wheelchair was a test, a way to see who would help me when I was down. I kicked the wheelchair over, letting it crash onto the driveway. I grabbed the handles of my suitcases, ignoring the pain in my back, and dragged them down the driveway. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the life I had built. I walked a mile in the rain to the main road, where I flagged down a passing truck, and the driver, a young man with a beard, helped me load my bags. He asked if I was okay, if I needed a hospital. just take me to the Motel 6 on the highway, I said. The Motel 6 was a stark contrast to the mansion. Neon lights buzzed and the air smelled of stale smoke and diesel fumes. The clerk behind. Bulletproof glass looked at me with pity. A soaking wet old man with mud on his shoes and bleeding hands. "One room, ground floor, cash," I said, placing a stack of damp bills on the counter. I got into room 104 and locked the deadbolt. I dragged my suitcases to the corner and sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. I was shivering. My bones felt like ice, but my mind was burning with a cold, clear fire. I took off my right boot. It was a custom-made leather boot, heavy and durable. I pried off the heel with a small pocket knife inside. Hidden in a hollowed-out compartment was a small black phone and a silver key with a Swiss bank logo. I turned on the phone. The battery was at 90% good. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once, twice, then a click. "Fairfax speaking," a voice said, smooth and professional. "Mr. Fairfax, it is Blackwood," I said. There was a pause on the other end, a pause of recognition and perhaps a little fear. "Mr. Blackwood, it has been a long time. Assume. This is not a social call." "Execute Protocol Omega," I said, my voice steady. "Protocol Omega." Fairfax repeated, his tone shifting to pure business. "Are you certain, sir, that is the nuclear option? Once we start, there is no going back." "Vanessa and Todd violated Clause 4, I said. Looking at the water dripping from my hair onto the cheap carpet, they evicted me less than 2 hours after the funeral. Start the clock. 72 hours. "Understood," Fairfax said. "I will alert the Trust Committee and the IRS. The countdown begins now. Do you need extraction?" "No," I said. "I need to watch. Let them think they have won for a few days. Let them spend. Let them celebrate. I want them to feel the height of the fall." "Very good, sir. Anything else?" "Yes, freeze the bridging loan. Authorize it first. Let them sign the papers. Then freeze it when the funds are in transit. I want them to owe money they do not have. Consider it done." I hung up the phone and put it back in my boot. I looked around the motel room, peeling paint, stained sheets, the sound of trucks roaring past on the highway. It was a hellhole, but for the next 3 days it would be my command center. I lay back on the bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. Vanessa thought she had inherited $55 million. She thought she was a queen. She did not know that the castle she was living in was designed by a man who built traps for a living, and she had just stepped on the trigger. The next morning the sun came out, but it brought no warmth. I woke up stiff, my joints screaming in protest. But I forced myself up. I had work to do. I walked across the street to a diner that had a view of the main road leading to the lake house. I ordered black coffee and toast and waited. Around 10 in the morning, a large truck rumbled past. It was a junk removal service, one of those companies you hire to clear out hoarders' houses. I watched as it turned toward the lake. My stomach tightened. They were not wasting any time. I finished my coffee and walked back toward the house. Keeping to the tree line, I had planted these trees 20 years ago, specifically to block the view from the road. But I knew a spot where the fence was low. I stood in the shadows and watched. Vanessa was standing on the front porch, wearing a white robe, holding a mimosa. Todd was beside her, directing the workers. "Everything goes," he shouted, pointing at the house furniture. "Clothes, books. I want it all gone. If it looks old, trash it. We are redecorating." I watched as 2 men carried out Catherine S. antique vanity, the one she had restored by hand. They tossed it into the back of the truck like it was firewood. The wood splintered with a sickening crunch. Next came my books, first editions of history and engineering volumes I had collected over a lifetime, thrown into a dumpster. "Careful with that," Todd yelled as a worker carried out a case of wine. "Hey, wait, bring that here." The worker handed him the case. It was my private reserve. Bottles of Chateau Margaux, worth $5,000 each. I had been saving them for our 50th anniversary. Todd pulled out a bottle and popped the cork. He did not pour it into a glass. Instead, he whistled for the dog. "Come here, Buster. Look at you. Your paws are muddy." He poured the $5,000 wine over the dog's paws, laughing, as the red liquid splashed onto the driveway, scrubbing the mud off with the expensive vintage. "Look at that, honey," Todd shouted to Vanessa. "Nothing but the best for our boy, cleaning the dog with liquids, worth more than the old man's life." Vanessa laughed, a high, cruel sound that echoed across the lawn. Post that on Instagram, babe caption, "It new money, new rules." I felt a heat rise in my chest, a fury so intense my vision blurred, but I did not move. I took out a small notebook from my pocket and wrote it down. Item 1, antique vanity destroyed. Item 2, library destroyed. Item 3, Chateau Margaux wasted maliciously. Every item was a line on the invoice they would have to pay. Fairfax was right. This was the nuclear option, but they were the ones pushing the button. Suddenly, the front door opened again, and a small figure ran out. It was Lily, my 18-year-old granddaughter. She was wearing pajamas, and she looked terrified. "Mom, stop!" she screamed, grabbing Vanessa's arm. "You cannot throw away Grandpa's things. He is coming back, right? He just went to a hotel." Vanessa shook her off, spilling her mimosa. "Get off me, Lily. Do not be stupid. He is not coming back. He is gone." "But this is his house," Lily cried. "Where is he? Is he okay? It was freezing last night." "Who cares?" Todd said, taking a swig from the wine bottle. "He is probably in a shelter by now where he belongs. Look, kid, you better get with the program. We are rich now. We do not need that dead weight dragging us down." "He is my grandpa!" Lily shouted. She ran toward the truck, trying to pull a box of photo albums out of the trash heap. Todd grabbed her by the arm and yanked her back so hard she fell onto the grass. "Do not touch that trash," he snarled, and, "Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. You mention him again, and I will cut off your credit cards. You want to go to that fancy art school in New York? You better shut your mouth and smile, or you will be out on the street with him." Lily lay on the grass crying. Vanessa did not even look at her. She just sipped her drink and watched the workers destroy my life. That was it. That was the line. I turned away and walked back to the motel. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from rage. I went into my room and pulled out the burner phone again. "Fairfax, yes, sir. Add a clause to the protocol. Guardianship of Lily transfers to the trust immediately and cut Todd's access to the joint accounts. Now leave him with nothing but the cash in his pocket." "Done, sir." I sat on the bed and waited an hour. Later, there was a knock on my motel door, soft, hesitant. I opened it. Lily stood there, her face streaked with tears, holding a backpack. "Grandpa," she whispered. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight while she sobbed against my chest. She smelled like rain and fear. "They kicked me out," she said, choking on the words. "I tried to stop them. Grandpa, I tried to save your books, but Dad, he hit me and told me to get out." "Hush now," I said, smoothing her hair. "Come inside, you are safe here." I brought her into the dingy room and gave her the only chair. "Grandpa." "What are we going to do?" she asked, looking around at the peeling wallpaper. "They have everything. They have the money, the house, the lawyers," Dad said. "They already spent $2 million this morning. He bought a boat online." I sat on the bed and looked at her. This girl was the only good thing that had come out of that house, the only one who had Catherine. Heart, Lily, I said, leaning forward. "Listen to me very carefully. I am not just a retired builder, and that house is not just a house." She looked at me confused. "What do you mean I built bunkers for the government?" "Lily, for 30 years, I built places designed to withstand the end of the world. That house on the lake looks like a mansion, but underneath it is a fortress, and right now your parents are locking themselves inside a trap that I designed." "But the money," she said. "The 55 million, I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "There is no 55 million, Lily, not for them. That money is a ghost. It is bait, and they just swallowed the hook." I checked my watch. 24 hours had passed since the eviction. 48 hours remained. Todd and Vanessa were probably celebrating right now, thinking they had won the lottery. They did not know that the bank transfer for their boat loan had just been flagged by the IRS. They did not know that the title to the house had just been frozen by a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And they certainly did not know that the old man in the Motel 6 was watching them through the hidden cameras I had installed in every room of that house years ago. I pulled a tablet out of my suitcase and turned it on. The screen flickered to life, showing a feed from the living room of the lake house. Vanessa was dancing on the coffee table, spilling champagne on the rug. Todd was on the phone yelling at someone, probably a bank teller, about why his card was declined. "Watch," I said to Lily, handing her the tablet. "Watch the show, my dear. Because in 48 hours, the roof is going to cave in on them, and we are going to be the only ones holding an umbrella." The countdown continued. Tick-tock. The next morning, I woke up in the motel room, feeling the cold dampness of the cheap sheets seeping into my bones. My joints were screaming from sleeping on a mattress that felt more like a bag of rocks, but I forced myself up. I had work to do, and the view from the diner across the street was going to be the most important surveillance of my life. I sat in a booth by the window, ordering black coffee and dry toast, keeping my eyes fixed on the driveway of the lake house I had built with my own hands 20 years ago. Around 10 in the morning, a large rumbling truck pulled up. It was not a moving van. It was a junk removal service, one of those companies you hire when you want to clear out a hoarder's house without sorting through anything. My stomach tightened as I watched them back up to the garage doors. They were not wasting any time. Vanessa was not just redecorating, she was erasing us. I paid for my coffee and walked back toward the house, keeping to the tree line. I had planted these pines, specifically to block the view from the main road for privacy. But now they served as my cover. I found a spot where the fence was low and the shadows were deep, and I watched. Vanessa was standing on the front porch, wearing a white silk robe and holding a mimosa. At 10 in the morning, she looked like the queen of a kingdom she had just conquered by poisoning the king. Todd was beside her, wearing sunglasses and pointing at the house like a general directing a massacre. "Everything goes," he shouted, his voice carrying over the morning breeze. "I want it all gone. If it looks old, trash it. We are redecorating with modern Italian pieces." I watched as two burly men carried out Catherine's antique vanity, the one she had found at an estate sale in France and restored by hand for months. I remembered the smell of the varnish she used, the way she would hum while she sanded the wood, seeing it now being tossed into the back of the truck like it was firewood. Made my hands shake. The wood splintered with a sickening crunch as it hit the metal floor of the dumpster. Next came my books, first editions of history and engineering volumes I had collected over a lifetime, thrown into a dumpster, like they were old newspapers. Then came Catherine's painting easel, the one she used to paint. The sunsets over the lake snapped in half by a careless worker. "Careful with that," Todd yelled suddenly, his voice sharp, not with concern for the object, but with greed. "Hey, wait, bring that here." The worker handed him a wooden case. It was my private reserve, bottles of Chateau Margaux, 1982, worth $5,000 each. I had been saving them for our 50th anniversary, which would have been next month. Todd pulled out a bottle and popped the cork with a pocket knife, ruining the seal. He did not pour it into a glass. Instead, he whistled for their dog, a pampered golden retriever named Buster, who was running around the yard, digging up Catherine's prize-winning tulips. "Come here, Buster. Look at you, your paws are muddy," Todd cooed. He poured the $5,000 wine over the dog, paws laughing as the deep red liquid splashed onto the driveway, staining the concrete like blood. He was scrubbing the mud off the dog with a vintage that connoisseurs would kill for. "Look at that, honey," Todd shouted to Vanessa. "Nothing but the best for our boy, cleaning the dog with liquids worth more than the old man's life." Vanessa laughed, a high, cruel sound that echoed across the lawn post, that on Instagram babe caption, "It knew money, knew rules." She took a sip of her drink and turned back to the workers. "Keep moving. I want this house empty by noon." I felt a heat rise in my chest, a fury so intense my vision blurred for a second. But I did not move. I did not scream. I reached into my pocket and took out a small leather notebook and a pen and one. Antique French vanity, destroyed value. $12,000, I wrote, my hand steady, despite the rage. Item 2, engineering library, destroyed value estimated $40,000. Item 3, Chateau Margaux, wasted maliciously value $5,000 per bottle. Every item was a line on the invoice. They would have to pay. Fairfax was right. This was the nuclear option, but they were the ones pushing the button. I was just the one recording the blast radius. Then I saw a car pull up, a sleek black sedan. A man in a sharp suit got out, holding a tablet. Todd walked over to him, wiping his wine-stained hands on his pants, and greeted him with a handshake that looked too eager. "Mr. Blackwood?" the man asked, looking at Todd. "That is me," Todd lied smoothly. "Vanessa Blackwood is my wife. We are the owners." "Excellent," the man said. "I have the papers for the Sunseeker yacht you inquired about. The financing is pending the final transfer of the estate funds, but if you sign the commitment now, we can have it docked at your pier by Friday." A yacht. They were buying a boat before my wife's body was even cold, before they had seen a single dime of the money they thought they had. "Let's do it," Todd said, grabbing the stylus and signing the digital pad with a flourish. $2 million, right? Put it on the tab. Vanessa clapped her hands, squealing with delight. "Oh, Todd, a yacht. We are going to be the kings of the lake," I wrote in my notebook. Fraudulent loan application, unauthorized purchase of luxury vessel, attempted theft of identity. They were digging a hole so deep they would never see the sun again, and they were doing it with smiles on their faces, convinced they had won the lottery. They did not know that the bank transfer for their boat loan had just been flagged by the IRS because of the call I made to Fairfax. They did not know that the title to the house had just been frozen by a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And they certainly did not know that the old man they thought was shivering in a shelter was standing 50 feet away, cataloging every sin. Suddenly the front door opened again, and a small figure ran out. It was Lily, my 18-year-old granddaughter. She was wearing pajamas, her hair messy, and she looked terrified. "Mom, stop!" she screamed, grabbing Vanessa's arm. "You cannot throw away Grandpa's things. He is coming back, right? He just went to a hotel." Vanessa shook her off, spilling her mimosa. "Get off me, Lily. Do not be stupid. He is not coming back. He is gone for good, but this is his house," Lily cried, tears streaming down her face. "Where is he? Is he okay? It was freezing last night." "Who cares?" Todd said, taking a swig from the wine bottle. "He is probably in a shelter by now where he belongs. Look, kid, you better get with the program. We are rich now. We do not need that dead weight dragging us down. He is my grandpa." Lily shouted. She ran toward the truck, trying to pull a box of photo albums out of the trash heap, risking injury as the workers continued to toss furniture. Todd grabbed her by the arm and yanked her back so hard she fell onto the wet grass. "Do not touch that trash," he snarled, standing over her. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. You mention him again, and I will cut off your credit cards. You want to go to that fancy art school in New York? You better shut your mouth and smile, or you will be out on the street with him." Lily lay on the grass, crying, clutching her arm where he had grabbed her. Vanessa did not even look at her. She just sipped her drink and watched the workers destroy my life. That was it. That was the line. I turned away and walked back to the motel. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from cold. Calculation. I went into my room and pulled out the burner phone again. "Fairfax, yes sir. Add a clause to the protocol guardianship of Lily. Transfers to the trust immediately and cut Todd's access to the joint accounts. Now leave him with nothing but the cash in his pocket." "Done, sir." I sat on the bed and stared at the water stains on the ceiling, waiting for the next domino to fall, because this party was just getting started, and the hangover was going to be lethal. The neon sign of the Motel 6 buzzed outside my window. A rhythmic, flickering sound that felt like a countdown clock inside the room. The air was stale, smelling of industrial cleaner and desperation. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cheap carpet, my phone resting on my knee, waiting. Fairfax had confirmed the financial blockade was in place, but I knew my enemy, and I knew that when rats are cornered, they do not just panic, they bite. It was just past midnight when the knock came. It was not the heavy pounding of a landlord or the polite rap of a maid. It was a frantic, terrified scratching against the wood, like a trapped animal trying to claw its way out. I stood up, my knees popping painfully, and moved to the door, and my hand instinctively going to the small knife I kept in my pocket. I checked the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Lily. I threw the bolt and yanked the door open. My granddaughter collapsed into my arms, soaking wet, shivering violently, her breath coming in jagged gasps. She was wearing a hoodie that was 2 sizes too big and carrying a backpack that looked like it had been packed in 10 seconds. "Grandpa," she choked out, burying her face in my chest. I did not know where else to go. I pulled her inside and locked the door, engaging the deadbolt and the chain. I led her to the heater unit and turned it up to the maximum setting. "Let me look at you," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. She looked up, and the rage turned into a cold, calculated fury. The left side of her face was swollen, a red handprint clearly visible against her pale skin. Her lip was split, a small trickle of dried blood running down her chin. "Odd," I said. "It was not a question," she nodded, tears spilling over her lashes. "He hit me, Grandpa. He told me I was ungrateful. He told me I was cut off. Sit," I commanded gently, guiding her to the only chair in the room. I poured a glass of water from the bathroom sink and handed it to her. "Drink, then talk." Lily took the glass. Her hands shaking so hard the water sloshed over the rim. She took a few gulps and took a deep breath. "I tried to stop them," she said, her voice trembling. "After you left, after the yacht guy left, they started talking about the wine cellar. Todd wanted to sell the vintage collection, the bottles you and Grandma bought in Napa," he said. "He found a buyer online who would pay cash tonight." I clenched my jaw. That collection was not just wine. It was 40 years of memories bottled and corked. I told them no. Lily continued. "I told them those were yours, that Grandma wanted you to have them, Vanessa. My mom," she just laughed. "She said you were dead to us, that your things were just assets to be liquidated, and then I told them I was going to call you. I told them I was going to get a lawyer because Grandma told me once that she set aside a college fund for me, and I wanted to make sure they did not touch it." I closed my eyes. Catherine had set that fund up. It was supposed to be untouchable, but Vanessa was the trustee. "Todd lost it," Lily whispered. "He grabbed my phone and smashed it against the wall. Then he looked at me with eyes I have never seen before. Grandpa, he looked like he wanted to kill me," he said. "The college fund was gone," he said. "He used it this morning to pay the deposit on the penthouse in Manhattan." "They stole your education," I said. My voice low, he slapped me. Lily touched her cheek, wincing. "He hit me so hard I fell into the wall. He said I was cut off. No school, no car, no allowance. He said, if I wanted to side with a loser like you, I could live like one. He threw my backpack at me and told me to get out before he called the cops and reported me as a runaway." I looked at my granddaughter, this brilliant artistic girl who had never hurt a fly, sitting in a cheap motel room, battered and discarded by the people who were supposed to protect her. "They made a mistake," I said, standing up. "They made a fatal tactical error." "Where are we going to go?" Lily asked. Looking around the dingy room. "We cannot stay here, right?" Todd said. "He would find us," he said. "He has friends who can make life difficult." "Todd's friends are low-level thugs and loan sharks," I said, dismissing them. "He thinks he is a shark, but he is just a goldfish swimming in a tank full of piranhas. And he just poked the glass." I grabbed my coat and my small suitcase. "Come with me, Lily. We are not staying here. This room was just a waiting station. We left the motel through the back exit, avoiding the cameras. I led her to the edge of the parking lot, where an old beat-up Ford pickup truck was parked. It looked like a piece of junk, rusted wheel wells, faded paint dents in the bumper. "Is this yours?" Lily asked. "It is registered to a shell company," I said, unlocking the door. "Get in." We drove for 10 minutes in silence, heading away from the highway, toward the industrial district of the town. This was the part of the city people ignored. Old warehouses, abandoned factories, places where the streetlights were broken and the shadows were long. I pulled up to a brick building that looked like it had been condemned 20 years ago. The windows were boarded up and there was a chain-link fence around the perimeter with a sign that said, "Danger, keep out, Grandpa." "Where are we?" Lily asked, her voice rising in panic. "Trust me," I said. I got out and unlocked the gate with a magnetic keycard hidden in my wallet. I drove the truck around the back to a loading dock that looked rusted shut. I got out and punched a code into a keypad hidden behind a loose brick. The massive steel door hissed and groaned, sliding upward with a smooth hydraulic hum that betrayed the building's decrepit exterior. We drove inside and the door closed behind us, sealing us in darkness, until the motion sensor lights flickered on, revealing a pristine high-tech garage. Lily gasped. The warehouse was empty except for a concrete ramp leading down into the floor. I drove down the ramp, descending into the earth. "Welcome to the bunker," I said. We parked in a lower level that looked like a military command center. There were servers, humming against the wall rows of filing cabinets, and a large table covered in blueprints. "This is where I worked, Lily," I said, helping her out of the truck. "People thought I was a contractor who built patios and driveways. That was the cover I built. Secure facilities for government officials who were afraid of the end of the world." I led her to the main desk and turned on a bank of monitors. "And when I built our house by the lake, I did not just build a home, I built a masterpiece of surveillance and security." I typed a command into the keyboard, and the screens flared to life. Lily's eyes went wide. On the screens, we could see every room of the lake house in high-definition, crystal-clear video. There was the living room, where Vanessa was currently passed out on the sofa, an empty wine bottle on the floor. There was the kitchen, where Todd was frantically pacing, holding his phone, screaming at someone. "How?" Lily asked, stepping closer to the screens. "Your mother thinks the house has smart home security," I said. "She thinks she controls the cameras from her phone. She does not realize that the system she sees is a decoy. The real system is hardwired into the foundation concealed behind the drywall. Inside the smoke detectors, even inside the eyes of the deerhead. Mounted in the den." I pointed to a blueprint spread out on the table. "Look at this." Lily looked down. It was a schematic of the house, but it was covered in red lines and technical notations. "This house is a vault," I explained. "The walls are reinforced with steel mesh. The panic room in the basement is not just a room. It is a fully independent survival cell with its own air filtration and power supply. And see this?" I pointed to a section marked Override. "I control the environment." "Lily, I control the locks, the lights, the water, the temperature. From this keyboard, I can turn that luxury mansion into a prison cell." I looked at the screen showing Todd. He was red in the face, throwing a vase against the wall. "He thinks he is the king of the castle," I said softly. "But he is just a rat in a maze, and I am about to turn off the cheese." Lily looked at me, and for the first time the fear in her eyes was replaced by awe. "You knew," she said. "You knew they would do this." "I suspected," I corrected her. "I hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would take the inheritance and be happy. I hoped they would treat you well, but I prepared for the worst." I touched the bruise on her cheek. "When he hit you, Lily, he crossed the final line. He declared war, and in war, you do not just defend yourself, you eliminate the threat." I pulled up a new window on the computer screen. It showed a bank transfer interface. "They spent your college fund," I said. "That was a mistake. But do not worry, I have been moving money for 40 years. I tapped a few keys. Fairfax has already initiated the clawback. The deposit on the penthouse, the transfer for the yacht. It is all being frozen as we speak. The banks are flagging the transactions as suspicious activity because the account holder Catherine Blackwood is deceased, and the probate court has not officially released the funds yet. But Vanessa said she had the money. Lily said she has a piece of paper that says she has the money. I said, but possession is 9/10 of the law, and right now the law is confused, which gives us time. I turned to Lily, my expression hardening. Todd cut off your credit cards. He tried to strand you. He tried to make you helpless. I reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a black debit card, handing it to her. This is an untraceable account. There is $50,000 on it. Go to the vending machine in the corner. Get whatever you want to eat. Then get some sleep on the cot in the back room. Grandpa, what are you going to do? Lily asked, clutching the card. I am going to work, I said, turning back to the screens. I watched Todd pacing in the kitchen. I reached out and typed a command. Remote lock sequence, Alpha, engage. On the screen, I saw Todd stop. He tried to open the patio door to let the dog out. He pulled on the handle. It did not move. He tried again. Shaking it, he walked to the front door and tried the handle. Locked, he was shouting now, yelling for Vanessa. I typed another command. Thermostat, override set to 50 degrees. The systems in the house began to whir. The heat cut off. The ambient temperature began to drop. They want to leave me out in the cold, I whispered to the screen. Let us see how they like the winter. I sat back in the chair, watching the panic begin to set in. Todd was running from window to window, trying to find a way out, but the hurricane shutters I had installed silently descended, locking into place. They were trapped inside a $55 million cage, and I was the one holding the key. 72 hours, I said to Lily. The countdown is still running, but for them, time just started moving a lot slower. Lily sat on the cot, watching the screens, watching her parents realize that the house they had stolen was fighting back. Grandpa, she said. Softly, yes, dear, make it colder. I smiled a grim, humorless smile. Consider it done. The blue light of the monitors reflected in my eyes as a new alert flashed across the center screen. It was a high-priority financial notification linked to the estate monitoring system I had set up years ago. I leaned forward, squinting at the text. Credit inquiry, bridging loan application, amount $2 million, applicant Todd Harrison. I let out a low, dark chuckle that echoed off the concrete walls of the bunker. Todd was not just greedy, he was suicidal. He was trying to borrow money against an inheritance he had not officially received yet, using my wife's death certificate as collateral. Lily was sleeping on the cot in the corner, exhausted from the trauma of the night. I kept my voice low as I pulled out the burner phone and dialed Fairfax. Report, I said the moment the line connected. They are at the First National branch downtown, Fairfax said, his voice crisp. The branch manager just flagged the application. Todd is waving your wife's death certificate around like a winning lottery ticket. He is demanding an immediate cash advance of $2 million, a bridging loan to cover expenses until the probate clears. I looked at the live feed from the bank AS security cameras, which I had accessed through a back door in their server. Todd was sweating, wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it. Probably because he had spent the last few hours shivering in a 50-degree house. Vanessa was next to him, wearing sunglasses indoors, tapping her foot impatiently. The manager wants to deny it, Fairfax continued. The risk assessment is too high. The will has not been executed yet, and there are flags on the property title. Approve it, I said. There was a silence on the line. Approve it, sir. That is $2 million of the bank money. It is not the bank's money if you structure it right, I said, staring at Todd. As desperate face on the screen, issue the loan as a personal liability. Line of credit secured against the anticipated assets. Make them sign a personal guarantee. If the estate does not pay out, they are on the hook for every cent. You want them to dig a deeper hole? Fairfax asked. I could hear the smile in his voice. I want them to bury themselves, I replied. Give them the money, Fairfax. But put a 24-hour recall clause in the fine print. Tell them it is standard procedure. Tell them whatever you have to just get them to sign the paper and put the cash in their hands. And Fairfax, yes sir, make sure the funds are available immediately. I want them to be able to spend it today, right now. Understood, authorizing the loan now. I hung up and turned back to the monitors. I typed a command into the console. System override, lockdown, disengaged on the screen, showing the lake house. The hurricane shutters slowly retracted. The front door clicked, unlocking. The thermostat began to hum, bringing the temperature back up to normal. I watched as Todd and Vanessa froze in the bank. Manager S office looking at their phones. They must have gotten a notification that the house, was back online. See, Todd shouted at the manager, waving his phone. It was just a glitch. The security system reset. We are fine. Now give me the pen. I watched him sign his name. It was a frantic scribbling motion, the signature of a man who thought he was escaping a burning building, only to run straight off a cliff. Vanessa signed next, her hand shaking slightly. Done, I whispered. The moment the funds hit their account, the tracking software on Todd's phone lit up like a Christmas tree. They left the bank walking with a new swagger. The fear from the cold night in the locked house was gone, replaced by the arrogance of instant wealth. They had $2 million in liquid cash, and they thought 53 million more was coming in 48 hours. Where are they going? Lily asked, her voice groggy from sleep. She was sitting up on the cot, rubbing her eyes. They are going hunting, I said, gesturing to the screen. But they do not realize they are the prey. I pulled up the GPS tracker. The dot representing Todd's car moved quickly through the city, stopping at the luxury auto mile. They pulled into a dealership that sold Italian sports cars. I hacked into the dealership's security feed, watching as a salesman practically tripped over himself to greet them. Todd pointed at a red convertible on the showroom floor. A car that cost more than my first house. He did not negotiate. He did not ask about mileage or warranty. He just slapped a debit card on the desk. Swipe it, he told the salesman. Full price. I watched the transaction log on my screen. Debit approved. $350,000. He is buying a Ferrari. Lily said, standing next to me, watching the screen in disbelief. He does not even know how to drive a stick shift. He is buying an image, I corrected her. He is buying the feeling of being important. They drove the car off the lot, leaving Catherine's Range Rover abandoned in the parking lot. Next stop was a high-end jewelry store in the financial district. Vanessa took. Vanessa. The lead here. She pointed at a diamond necklace in the case, then a watch for Todd, then earrings. She was pointing at things, not because she liked them, but because they were the most expensive items in the case. Transaction approved. $180,000 they were burning through cash, at a rate that was almost impressive. It was a frenzy, a manic episode fueled by greed and the desperate need to prove they were winners. Why are they doing this? Lily asked. It does not make sense. They just got the money. They are scared, I said. They are terrified deep down. They know something is wrong. They know I am out here somewhere. They know the house locked them in last night. Spending money is the only way they know how to soothe themselves. It makes it real to them. If they can buy a Ferrari, the money must be real. If they can buy diamonds, they must be safe. The GPS dot moved again, this time to a real estate office in the penthouse district. I switched feeds, accessing the audio from Todd's phone, which I had compromised months ago when he asked me to fix his screen. We want the penthouse, Todd was saying. His voice loud and booming. The one on the 45th floor with the private elevator. Sir, the realtor said, sounding hesitant. That unit requires a significant deposit and a background check. I will give you a $500,000 deposit right now, Todd interrupted, non-refundable. Write it up. I watched the transaction log. $500,000 gone. Just like that, they were signing contracts left and right, obligating themselves to monthly payments, maintenance fees, insurance premiums. They were building a life that required a $50 million foundation, and they were building it on quicksand. By 5 in the afternoon, they had spent or committed nearly $1.5 million of the $2 million loan. They were drunk on spending high on the adrenaline of consumption. They drove back to the lake house in the new Ferrari, leaving the top down even though it was cold. The trunk was filled with orange shopping bags from Hermes and black bags from Chanel. They pulled into the driveway, honking the horn as if expecting a parade. I watched them on the house cameras. They carried the bags inside, kicking the door open. "We are back, baby," Todd shouted, his voice echoing in the empty hallway where the antique vanity used to be. "We are the kings of this castle." Vanessa spun around, laughing, spinning in her new dress. She popped a bottle of champagne, spraying it over the new furniture they had ordered for same-day delivery. To us, she screamed, to 55 million. I sat in the bunker, my hand hovering over the keyboard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the monitors. The 24-hour clock on the loan recall was ticking. The 72-hour clock on the trust protocol was ticking. They were celebrating in a house they did not own, drinking champagne paid for with money they did not have, driving a car that was about to be repossessed. "It is time to turn up the heat," I said to Lily. I typed a command. "Internal audio system, override playlist selection, funeral march." In the lake house, the high-end speakers installed in every ceiling suddenly crackled to life, the somber, heavy notes of Chopin's. Funeral march began to play at maximum volume. Todd dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. "What the hell is that?" he screamed, covering his ears. Vanessa looked around, her eyes wide with panic. "Turn it off, Todd." "Turn it off." Todd ran to the wall panel, frantically stabbing at the controls. "It is locked out. I cannot stop it." I leaned into the microphone on my desk. "Enjoy the music," I said, my voice booming through the house speakers like the voice of God. They both froze, looking up at the ceiling. "Dad." Vanessa whispered, her face draining of color. "You spent a lot of money today, kids," I said, my voice calm, cold. "You better hope you have the receipt." Todd looked at the phone in his hand, suddenly realizing that the device he had used to transfer millions was also a listening device. He threw it across the room. "He is watching us," Vanessa screamed. "He is watching us right now." I cut the feed to the speakers, leaving them in silence, except for their own terrified breathing. Then I picked up my burner phone and texted Fairfax, "Recall the loan." The trap snapped shut. On the screen, I saw Todd S. replacement phone buzz on the counter. He picked it up and read the notification. His knees gave out. He slid down the wall to the floor, the color of ash. "What is it?" Vanessa asked, grabbing his arm. "The bank," Todd whispered. "The loan, they called it back. They say there is an irregularity with the collateral. They want the $2 million back within 24 hours, or they press charges for fraud." Vanessa stared at him, then at the shopping bags, then at the Ferrari in the driveway. "We spent it," she whispered. "We spent almost all of it." Todd looked up at the ceiling, his eyes hunting for the hidden cameras. "Bernie," he screamed, "you old bastard, what did you do?" "I did nothing," I said to the empty room in the bunker. "I just gave you the rope. You were the ones who tied the noose." The waiting room of Fairfax and Associates smelled of mahogany leather and old money. It was the kind of silence that usually cost $500 an hour to experience. I sat in a high-backed wing chair in the corner, wearing my old work boots and a flannel shirt that I had retrieved from the back of the truck. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the head of a cane I did not really need. I checked my watch. 70 hours had passed since I was thrown out into the rain. Exactly 2 hours remained until the 72-hour deadline expired. The heavy double doors burst open and the silence shattered. Vanessa and Todd marched in, bringing a storm of chaotic energy with them. They looked like a magazine advertisement that had been left out in the rain. Vanessa was wearing a white dress that was clearly new, likely bought during their spending spree yesterday. But her hair was frayed and her eyes were manic, darting around the room as if she expected the FBI to jump out from behind the potted plants. Todd looked worse. His face was a pasty shade of gray, sweat beading on his forehead. Despite the air conditioning, he was clutching a briefcase so tightly his knuckles were white. They did not see me at first. They went straight to the receptionist, slamming their hands on the desk. "We're here to see Mr. Fairfax." Todd barked, his voice cracking slightly. "We have an appointment for the reading of the will. Tell him we need the check cut today immediately." The receptionist did not even look up from her screen. "Mr. Fairfax will be with you shortly. Please take a seat." Todd turned around, pacing like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. He muttered something about deadlines and wire transfers, trying to keep his voice down, but failing. He was terrified. I knew exactly why the bank had recalled the $2 million loan yesterday evening, demanding repayment within 24 hours. That deadline was approaching fast. If he did not walk out of here with $55 million today, he was going to prison for fraud. Then Vanessa saw me. She froze, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure hatred. She nudged Todd and pointed. "What is he doing here?" she hissed loud enough for the whole room to hear. Todd spun around, his eyes widening briefly before narrowing into a sneer. He walked over to me, stopping just short of my boots, looking down at me with the arrogance of a man who thinks he has already won. "Did you follow us here, Bernie?" he asked, laughing, a dry, nervous sound. "Did you come to beg for scraps? I told you. The will says you get nothing. You are wasting your time." I did not answer. I just looked at him, my face completely blank. I tapped my finger against the face of my watch. Tick-tock. Vanessa stomped over her heels, clicking on the hardwood floor. She stood next to her husband, crossing her arms. "Look at him, Todd, sitting there like a bad smell, Dad. You are embarrassing yourself. Mom cut you out for a reason. She knew you were just a leech. She knew I was the one who deserved the legacy." She leaned down, getting right in my face. Her perfume was overpowering, cloying and sweet, covering up the scent of fear. "Go back to your motel, Dad," she whispered. "Or better yet, go back to the gutter. We are about to become royalty, and you are just a stain on the carpet." I remained silent, watching them unravel. They were vibrating with adrenaline and panic, a toxic cocktail that made them reckless. They thought my silence was defeat. They did not know it was the calm before the execution. The door to the inner office opened, and Fairfax stepped out. He was a tall man, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Todd's Ferrari. His face was unreadable, a perfect mask of professional indifference. He held a thick leather folder in his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "Mr. Blackwood." "Please come in," Vanessa huffed, straightening her dress, finally. "Let us get this over with." She grabbed Todd's arm and pulled him toward the office, not even waiting for me. I stood up slowly, leaning on the cane for effect, following them into the conference room. It was a massive space dominated by a long table made of polished walnut windows overlooked the city skyline, showing the world they thought they were about to conquer. Todd and Vanessa sat on one side of the table, grabbing the leather chairs as if they were thrones. I sat on the opposite side, alone. Fairfax sat at the head of the table, opening the folder with deliberate slowness, every movement calculated to increase the tension. "Can we skip the formalities?" Todd blurted out, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "We know what it says. We just need the funds released. We have investments pending, time-sensitive investments." Fairfax looked at Todd over the rim of his reading glasses. "Mr. Harrison, the reading of the last will and testament of Catherine Blackwood is a legal proceeding. It must be conducted with precision to ensure the validity of the transfer, especially considering the size of the estate." "Just read it," Vanessa snapped. "We have places to be." Fairfax cleared his throat and began to read, his voice monotonous and steady. Catherine. Elizabeth Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this document to be my last will and testament, regarding the disposition of my entire estate, including real property, financial assets, and the Blackwood Family Trust. Todd leaned forward, his eyes hungry, greedy. Tell us the number, just tell us the number. Fairfax ignored him, continuing to read legal clauses about debts, taxes, and funeral arrangements. Vanessa was tapping her long fingernails on the table, a rhythmic clicking sound that grated on the nerves. She glared at me across the table, mouthing the word, loser. Finally, Fairfax turned a page and looked up. Article 3, Distribution of Assets. The room went deathly silent. Even Todd stopped bouncing his leg. To my husband, Bernard Blackwood. Fairfax read, I leave my collection of vintage vinyl records and the contents of the gardening shed. Vanessa let out a loud, harsh laugh, throwing her head back. See, I told you, Dad, you get the shovel, maybe you can use it to dig a hole to sleep in. Todd smirked, relaxing visibly. Records and a shed, tough break. Bernie Fairfax raised a hand, silencing them. To my beloved daughter, Vanessa. Fairfax continued, raising his voice slightly to cut through their mockery. I leave the entirety of the liquid assets currently held in the Blackwood Family Trust, totaling $55 million, as well as the deed to the property located at 124 Lakeview Drive, and all contents therein. The explosion of relief from the other side of the table was physical. Todd slumped back in his chair, letting out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Thank God, he whispered, closing his eyes. Thank God! Vanessa screamed with joy, jumping out of her chair. Yes, she shouted, pumping her fist in the air. I knew it. Mom knew exactly what she was doing. 55 million, baby. We are rich. We are filthy rich. She grabbed Todd and kissed him. A frantic, desperate kiss of two people who had just survived a firing squad. Then she turned to me, her face twisted into a mask of cruel triumph. Did you hear that, Dad? She gloated. $55 million for me, and a box of old records for you. That is what you are worth. That is what Mom thought of you. You are nothing. You are absolutely nothing. Todd was laughing now, a hysterical edge to his voice, pulling out his phone, probably to call the bank and tell them the money was coming. Call off the dogs. Hey, Bernie, do not worry. I will buy your records from you. Give you $10 so you can buy a sandwich. I sat there, stone-faced, watching them celebrate. Their victory was absolute in their minds. They had won everything. They had the money to pay back the loan. They had the money to keep the Ferrari and the penthouse. They had the power to crush me. Vanessa walked around the table, standing over me, looking down with pity and disgust. I want you out of my town, she said, her voice cold and hard. Take your records and go, Dad. If I see you again, I will have you arrested for harassment. You are dead to me. Fairfax watched them, his expression unchanged. He waited until their cheering died down, until they were sitting back in their chairs, grinning like hyenas who had just taken down a lion. He waited until the silence returned to the room, heavy and pregnant. Then he turned the page of the document. The sound of the paper turning was loud in the quiet room. There is a codicil, Fairfax said, his voice cutting through their celebration like a razor blade. Vanessa stopped smiling. A codicil, what is that? An amendment, Fairfax explained. A condition applied to the inheritance. Todd waved his hand, whatever. Just read it. It probably says we have to visit her grave once a year or something. Fine, we will do it. Just give us the check. Fairfax looked at me for a split second, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. Then he looked back at the document, the inheritance of $55 million, and the real estate property is bequeathed to Vanessa Blackwood solely and exclusively under the structure of a protective trust. Protective trust, Vanessa asked, her brow furrowing. What does that mean? It means, Fairfax said, that you do not own the money directly. The trust owns the money, and the trust has specific rules for how the money can be accessed and maintained. So what? Todd said, annoyed. Fine, it is in a trust. We are the trustees, right? We control it. Fairfax shook his head. No. Mr. Harrison, you are not the trustees. The trust is managed by an independent board. But there is a primary condition for the beneficiary that must be met for the trust to remain active and for the funds to be dispersed. What condition? Vanessa demanded, her voice rising in pitch. Fairfax adjusted his glasses and read from the page. Condition clause number 4, in order for Vanessa Blackwood to receive any distributions from the trust and to maintain residence in the family home, her father, Bernard Blackwood, must reside in the property as the primary guardian. The room went silent again. But this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a bomb falling before it hits the ground. What? Vanessa whispered. Fairfax continued reading. Bernard Blackwood must be provided with full access to the main residence. He must be treated with dignity and care, and he must not under any circumstances be evicted, removed, or coerced into leaving the property. If Bernard Blackwood is removed from the property for a period exceeding 72 hours against his will, the trust is automatically dissolved. Todd choked out, his face turning white. What happens if it is dissolved? Fairfax looked at him with cold, dead eyes. If the condition is violated, the entire sum of $55 million is immediately transferred to the Wounded Warrior Project charity. The house is seized and sold, with proceeds going to the same charity furthermore, and this is the important part. He paused, letting the suspense build. Furthermore, as the named heir, Vanessa Blackwood will remain liable for the estate taxes on the initial valuation of $55 million. The tax liability is estimated at roughly $22 million, due immediately upon the dissolution of the trust, regardless of whether she retains the principal sum. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked at me, then at Fairfax, then at Todd. Wait, she stammered. Wait, so if Dad does not live there, I do not get the money, correct? Fairfax said. And I owe the government $22 million, correct? Todd stood up, his chair clattering backward. That is insane. That cannot be legal. You cannot do that. It is perfectly legal, Fairfax said calmly. It is a standard clause for parents who are concerned about the moral character of their children. Catherine wanted to ensure that her husband was cared for. She knew that if she left the money to you, directly, you might discard him, so she made him the key to the vault. Vanessa turned to me, her eyes wide with horror. Dad, you knew about this. I looked at my watch, checking the time. 1 hour and 45 minutes remained. I might have read a draft, I said, my voice low and rough. Todd looked at his phone, his hands shaking violently. The bank, the loan. If we do not get that money today, if we cannot prove the assets are ours, they are going to arrest me for fraud. He lunged across the table, grabbing Fairfax by the lapels. Fix it, now! Fairfax did not flinch. Security, he said quietly. 2 large men in suits stepped into the room from the hallway, pulling Todd off the lawyer and shoving him back into his chair. Sit down, Mr. Harrison, Fairfax said, smoothing his suit jacket, or I will have you removed, and you will forfeit your chance to resolve this. How much time do we have? Vanessa asked, her voice trembling. How much time until the 72 hours is up? Fairfax looked at the grandfather clock, in the corner of the room, then at his wristwatch. Your father was evicted from the premises at approximately 2 p.m. on the day of the funeral. According to the sworn affidavit of the limo driver and security footage, Fairfax said, it is now 12:15 p.m. 3 days later. He looked at Vanessa. You have exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes to get Bernard Blackwood back into his residence and established as the guardian, if he is not inside the house when the clock strikes 2. The trust dissolves, the money vanishes, and the tax bill is issued. Todd looked at me, his eyes bulging with terror. 1 hour 45 minutes. We have to go now. He grabbed Vanessa's arm, pulling her toward the door. Come on. We have to get him to the house. Vanessa looked at me, tears of panic streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Dad, Please, Dad, you have to come with us right now, please. I stayed seated in the wing chair, my hands resting on my cane. I did not move, I do not know, I said slowly, looking at the ceiling, pretending to think about it. I am pretty comfortable at the Motel 6. The water pressure is not great, but the people are polite. Nobody throws my suitcases in the mud, Dad. Todd screamed, his voice cracking. Dad. Please, we are begging you, if you do not come back, we are ruined. We go to jail, Dad. $22 million in taxes, we do not have that. We do not have anything. I looked at Todd, then at Vanessa. You should have thought about that, I said before. You poured my wine on the dog. Vanessa fell to her knees, right there on the expensive rug, crawling toward me, grabbing my hand. Her palms were sweaty. Daddy, please, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was stressed. I was grieving. I did not mean it. Just come home, please. Just come home and we can be a family again. I will do anything. I looked down at her, at the daughter who had told me to go die somewhere else 3 days ago. Anything, I asked. Yes, anything, she sobbed. Just get in the car. I looked at Fairfax. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. I stood up slowly, groaning as my knees took my weight. I said, We'll go back. Todd let out a sob of relief. Thank you. Thank you. Bernie, let us go. The car is downstairs. But I said, stopping them in their tracks. I am not riding in the back seat with the dog. No. No, of course not, Todd said. You can drive, you can sit wherever you want. And I continued looking at Vanessa. I want my room back exactly the way it was before you trashed it. Vanessa went pale, Dad. We cleared it out. The furniture is gone. I leaned in close to her face. Then you better find it, I said, cold and hard, because if I walk into that house and it does not look like my home, I am walking right back out. And you can explain to the IRS why you owe them $22 million. Tick-tock, Vanessa, I said, tapping my watch. Tick-tock. The room was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the hard drive in Fairfax's laptop. But inside Todd and Vanessa's heads, I knew it sounded like a bomb siren screaming. Imminent impact. Fairfax adjusted his silk tie and leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished walnut table, looking like a predator examining a particularly slow gazelle. You seem confused, Mr. Harrison, Fairfax said, his voice devoid of sympathy. So let me clarify the legal architecture of this situation. Catherine Blackwood did not trust you. She believed you to be a financial liability and a moral vacuum. Therefore, she utilized a very specific instrument called a conditional protective trust. Todd was sweating profusely now, the gray pallor of his skin turning a sickly green. He loosened his collar, trying to find air in the climate-controlled room. Whatever, Todd stammered. Just tell us how to get the money. I am afraid you are not listening, Fairfax said. The trust is a legal entity that holds the assets. The assets do not belong to Vanessa until the conditions are met. If the conditions are violated, the trust dissolves itself. It commits financial suicide. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table, cracking a nail. What does that mean? She shrieked. What do you mean, dissolves? Fairfax turned the page of the document, the paper rustling loudly. It means the money is donated, Fairfax said, calm as a gravedigger, specifically to the Wounded Warrior Project, a charity your father has supported for decades. Catherine felt that if her family could not care for its own veteran, then the money should go to veterans who had no one. And here is the twist, Fairfax continued, looking over his glasses at Vanessa. The IRS views the dissolution of a trust due to beneficiary negligence differently than a standard charitable donation. Because you are the named beneficiary, the tax code considers the assets to have passed through your hands constructively before being forfeited due to your failure to meet the conditions. He paused, letting the words hang there. To put it in layman terms, Fairfax said, smiling a thin, cruel smile, the government will view this as you inheriting $55 million and then losing it. The estate tax bill, however, remains. The federal estate tax is 40% on amounts over the exemption limit. Plus state taxes, you will owe the Internal Revenue Service approximately $22 million payable immediately upon the closure of the probate. Vanessa looked at me, her eyes wide and glassy with horror. She tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. 22 million, she whispered. I do not have 22 million, I have nothing. Correct, Fairfax said. You will have zero assets and a $22 million debt. The IRS will garnish every paycheck you ever earn. They will seize any property you acquire. They will place liens on your future. It is financial slavery, Vanessa, for the rest of your life. Todd stood up so fast his chair tipped over, crashing onto the floor behind him. No! He shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. That is a lie. You are lying to scare us. We bought a boat. I signed a contract for a penthouse. I took a loan from the bank against this money. Fairfax looked at Todd with mild interest. You took a bridge loan? Fairfax asked. Yes. Todd screamed, $2 million. Fairfax checked his watch and made a note on his legal pad. Then you have committed bank fraud. Mr. Harrison, you secured a loan using collateral that you do not own. And if we do not resolve this in the next 90 minutes, you never will own it. When the trust dissolves, the bank will realize the collateral is gone. They will call the FBI. You will likely face 10 to 15 years in federal prison. The room spun for them, I could see it. Todd looked like he was about to vomit. Vanessa looked like she was having a stroke. I sat in the corner, my hands resting on my cane, my face impassive. This is the reality, I said, my voice breaking the silence like a hammer drop. You two thought you were playing Monopoly, but you were playing Russian roulette, and you just heard the click. Vanessa turned to me, falling to her knees on the plush carpet, ignoring the run in her expensive stockings. Dad, she begged. Crawling toward my chair, Daddy, please, you have to help us. You cannot let this happen. I looked down at her, this woman who had thrown my clothes into the mud 3 days ago. I did not let this happen, Vanessa, I said coldly. You did. You chose this. You chose the money over me, and now the money is eating you alive. Fairfax cleared his throat, drawing their attention back to the clock. We are wasting time, he said, checking his Rolex again, according to the affidavit from the limo driver and the security footage from the neighbor's doorbell camera. Mr. Blackwood was ejected from the property at exactly 2:14 p.m. on Tuesday. It is now 12:30 p.m. on Friday. He looked at Vanessa. You have 1 hour and 44 minutes to reinstate Mr. Blackwood as the resident guardian of the estate if he is not physically inside the house with his belongings restored and a key in his hand by 2:14 p.m. The electronic filing system automatically triggers the dissolution. Todd grabbed his hair, pulling at it. 1 hour. Todd shouted, we are an hour away. The traffic is bad. It is raining. Then you better start driving, Fairfax said, closing the folder. Todd lunged for Vanessa, grabbing her arm and hauling her to her feet. Get up, he screamed, dragging her toward the door. We have to go now. Move. Vanessa stumbled, looking back at me with mascara running down her cheeks. Dad, please come with us, please. I stayed seated. I did not move a muscle. I do not know, I said slowly, looking at my fingernails. The Motel 6 has a vending machine. I kind of like the Cheetos. Dad. Todd screamed, his eyes bulging out of his head. We will buy you a truck full of Cheetos. We will buy you the factory. Just get in the car. I looked at Fairfax. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap was set. The prey was caught now. It was time. It was. To reel them in. Stood up slowly, exaggerating the groan of my old joints. I leaned heavily on the cane, taking a painful amount of time to adjust my coat. Fine, I said. I will go. Todd practically sobbed with relief, rushing to the door to hold it open. Thank you. Thank you. Bernie, hurry, please. I stopped in the doorway and looked at Todd. Do not call me Bernie, I said, my voice low and dangerous. My name is Mr. Blackwood, and if you ever address me by anything else, I will turn around and walk right back here." Todd nodded frantically. "Yes, sir, Mr. Blackwood. Sir, sorry." I walked to the elevator, Todd and Vanessa hovering around me like nervous birds, terrifyingly afraid that I might trip or change my mind. They pressed the button repeatedly, as if that would make the car arrive faster. When the doors opened, we stepped inside. The ride down to the lobby was silent except for Todd. Heavy breathing and the sound of Vanessa weeping softly. We reached the parking lot, and Todd ran to the bright red Ferrari, parked in the handicap spot. "Get in," he yelled, opening the passenger door. I looked at the low-slung sports car. It was a beautiful machine, but it was built for speed, not for old men with bad knees. "I cannot get in that," I said. "It is too low." Todd looked like he was about to cry. "Please, Mr. Blackwood, just try. We do not have time to call a cab." I stood there, the rain starting to drizzle again, reminding me of the day they kicked me out. Vanessa ran to her Range Rover, which was parked nearby. "Take the truck," she yelled. "It is easier." Todd ran to the Range Rover and threw the back door open. The interior still smelled like wet dog and cheap flowers. I looked at the back seat. "I am not sitting in the back," I said. "I am not a dog." "No, no, of course not," Todd said, running to the front passenger door and opening it. "You sit here up front, plenty of leg room." I climbed into the seat, taking my time, fastening my seatbelt with agonizing slowness. Todd jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine revving it loudly. Vanessa jumped into the Ferrari following us. Todd peeled out of the parking lot, cutting off a bus, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He drove like a maniac, weaving through traffic, running yellow lights. "Slow down," I said calmly. "If we die in a car crash, the trust dissolves anyway." Todd slowed down slightly, but his foot was still heavy on the gas. "We have an hour and 15 minutes, he muttered, checking the dashboard clock. "We can make it if the bridge is clear." I looked out the window, watching the city pass by. I saw the shops, the restaurants, the people going about their lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this luxury SUV. "You know, Todd," I said casually, looking at the leather dashboard. "Nice car. Did you pay for this with the loan?" Todd flinched, gripping the wheel tighter. "Yeah," he whispered. "And the Ferrari Vanessa is driving." "Yeah." "And the boat." Todd let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "Yeah, we spent it all. We spent almost all of it." I nodded slowly. "Well, then you better hope there is no traffic," I said, "because if we are late, you are going to be explaining to a very large inmate named Bubba why you defrauded a federal bank." Todd pressed the gas pedal down harder, the engine roaring as we merged onto the highway toward the lake house. The rain began to fall harder, slashing against the windshield, the wipers beating a frantic rhythm that matched Todd's heart rate. "Tick-tock, Todd," I whispered. "Tick-tock." The windshield wipers slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the torrential downpour, as Todd drove with a reckless desperation that terrified me, not because I was afraid of dying, but because I was afraid he would kill us before the clock struck 2:14. The digital dashboard clock read 1:12 p.m., leaving us with exactly 62 minutes to cover 30 miles of rain-slicked highway and bridge traffic. I sat in the passenger seat of the Range Rover, watching Todd unravel. His hands were gripping the leather steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were the color of bone, and sweat was pouring down his face, mixing with the condensation on the windows behind us. I could see the low headlights of the red Ferrari through the rain. Vanessa was tailgating us, driving a car she did not know how to handle, in weather that demanded caution. Suddenly, the dashboard screen lit up with a notification from Todd's bank app. His phone was connected to the car's Bluetooth system. So the message scrolled across the main display in large high-definition letters: "Alert account, frozen, suspicious, activity. Detected, contact. Fraud department. Immediately." Todd let out a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a sob. He swerved, crossing the center line and nearly clipping an 18-wheeler. The truck horn blared a long, angry note that vibrated through the chassis of the SUV. "Watch the road," I said calmly, adjusting my seatbelt, my voice cutting through his panic. "No, no, no." Todd hammered the steering wheel with his fist. "They cannot freeze it." "I spent it. I spent the money." "How can they freeze an account that is already empty?" "They are freezing the overdraft protection," I said, looking at the screen and the bridge loan. "It means the bank knows, Todd. It means Fairfax triggered the fraud alert. The system realizes you borrowed money against an asset you do not legally possess yet. You are not just broke anymore, you are radioactive." Todd's face turned a sickly shade of green, reached for the phone trying to dial the bank while driving 80 miles an hour. Then the phone rang. It was not the bank, the caller ID just said private number. Todd stared at the screen, his eyes widening with a primal fear. He hit decline. It rang again immediately. "Answer it," I said. "I cannot." He whispered, his voice trembling. "It is them who is them, Todd." He did not answer, but I knew I had worked in construction my whole life. I knew guys who gambled on steel prices and lost. I knew the look of a man who owed money to people who did not use lawyers to collect debts. "Answer it," I commanded, "or I will open this door and roll out of this car right now." Todd hit the answer button. The voice that filled the cabin was deep, calm, and terrifyingly casual. "Todd," the voice said, "you are hard to reach today." "Hey, Sal." Todd stammered, sweat dripping off his nose onto his expensive shirt. "I was just about to call you. Do not lie to me, Todd," Sal said. "We saw the transactions. We saw you bought a boat. We saw the Ferrari. We know the old lady kicked the bucket, and we know you came into some money." Yes, I did," Todd said, smiling frantically at the dashboard, as if Sal could see him. "I have it, Sal. I have the 50 grand, plus the VIG. I can wire it to you tonight." 50 grand. Sal laughed, a dry sound like sandpaper on concrete. "Todd, you borrowed another 100 last week to cover the spread on the Knicks game. You owe me 150 plus interest, and since I see you spending money like a drunken sailor, I am calling the note due today, all of it. Or my boys are going to come repo that Ferrari and maybe take a few of your fingers as a down payment." "I do not have it right now," Todd screamed. "The bank froze the account." "Just give me 2 hours, Sal. Just 2 hours. I swear." "You have 1 hour, Todd," Sal said. "The clock is ticking." The line went dead. The silence in the car was heavier than the humid air outside. Todd was hyperventilating, his chest heaving. So I said, breaking the silence, "Loan sharks, Todd. Really? It was a sure thing," he cried, hitting the steering wheel again. "The tip was solid. I was going to double the money and pay them back before anyone knew." "And now I asked, now I am dead," he whispered. "If I do not get that trust fund released, if I do not become the trustee of that $55 million, Sal is going to kill me." I looked out the window, watching the rain blur the world outside. "Then you better drive faster," I said, "because you are running out of time on 2 different clocks." We hit the bridge traffic at 1:35 p.m. A sea of red brake lights stretched out in front of us, a gridlock caused by the weather and a jackknifed tractor-trailer 3 miles ahead. We came to a complete stop, the engine idling, the rain drumming on the roof like a death march. Todd screamed a raw, guttural sound of pure frustration. He pounded the horn, but the cars in front of us had nowhere to go. "We are not going to make it," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "We are going to lose." Everything. I checked my watch, 39 minutes left. Suddenly, there was a tapping on my window. I turned to see Vanessa standing in the rain, her hair plastered to her skull, her white dress soaked and transparent, clinging to her body. She looked like a ghost. She motioned frantically for me to roll down the window. I pressed the button, and the glass slid down, letting in the freezing rain and the noise of the highway. "Why are we stopped?" she shrieked over the sound of the traffic. "Move, Todd. Move the car." "We are stuck, Vanessa," Todd yelled back, leaning over me. "We cannot move. There is an accident." Vanessa looked at her watch, then at me. Her eyes were wild, rimmed with smeared mascara. "Dad," she said, her voice taking on that wheedling, desperate tone she used when she wanted something. "You have to help us call the lawyer. Tell him we are here. Tell him we are close. Tell him to stop the clock." "It does not work like that, Vanessa," I said, looking at her standing in the mud in her ruined designer shoes. "The trust is a legal instrument. It is automated. The filing happens electronically at 2:14 p.m. Exactly. If I am not in the house with my key in the door, the system files the dissolution paperwork. There is no pause button." She began to cry, huge, racking sobs that shook her shoulders. She reached through the window and grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my jacket. "Please, Daddy," she begged, ignoring the rain soaking her face. "I am your daughter. I am your little girl. You cannot let me go to prison. You cannot let me lose everything. I will be good. I promise I will take care of you. Just us save." I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had pointed to the door 3 days ago and told me to get out. "I tried to save you. Vanessa," I said softly. "I tried to save you from yourself for 35 years. I gave you everything. I paid for your school, your cars, your weddings. I bailed you out every time you fell down. And what did I get for it? I got evicted," I said, my voice hardening. "I got thrown away like garbage the second you thought you did not need me anymore." "I am sorry," she wailed, falling to her knees, right there on the dirty asphalt of the highway bridge. Oblivious to the other drivers staring at the spectacle, she hugged my legs, burying her face against my wet jeans, ruining the leather interior of the car. "I am sorry, Daddy. I am so sorry. Please just get us the money." It was always about the money, wasn't it? I asked, looking down at the top of her head, even now. "You are not crying because you hurt me. You are crying because you are about to be poor." She looked up at me and I saw the truth in her eyes, a vast, empty well of greed and selfishness that no amount of love could ever fill. Todd leaned over me, grabbing my shoulder. "Bernie, listen to me. We can get out and run. We can run to the house. It is only 2 miles past the bridge. We can make it on foot." I looked at Todd, then at Vanessa kneeling in the road, then at my own legs. "I do not think so, Todd," I said, rubbing my knee, wincing, as if in great pain. "My arthritis is flaring up, something terrible. This cold, damp weather, it is murder on my joints." "I do not think I can walk 2 miles, Todd," his face twisted in horror. "You have to," he said. "You have to try." "I cannot," I said, leaning back in the seat. "Getting comfortable, I really cannot. The pain is excruciating. Maybe if I had stayed in my warm house instead of sleeping in a cheap motel for 3 nights. My legs would be better, but as it stands, I am immobile." Vanessa stood up, looking from me to the traffic jam. "We will carry you," she said, her eyes manic. "We will push you." "I am 200 pounds, Vanessa," I said. "And you are wearing heels." She kicked off her shoes, standing barefoot on the rough pavement. "I do not care," she screamed. "I will drag you if I have to." Just then the traffic began to move inch by inch, the red sea of lights parting slightly. "Get in the car!" Todd yelled at her. "Go, go, go!" Vanessa ran back to the Ferrari, her bare feet splashing in puddles. She jumped in and revved the engine. Todd slammed on the gas, closing the gap to the car in front of us, nearly rear-ending a sedan. 30 minutes left. He muttered, checking the clock. 30 minutes to go 5 miles. We cleared the accident site at 1:50 p.m. The road opened up and Todd floored it, the heavy SUV roaring as it pushed past. 90 miles an hour, the rain was blinding, but Todd drove with the focus of a man with a gun to his head, which in his case was metaphorically true, thanks to Sal. We exited the highway and turned onto the winding road that led to the lake house. The tires screeched on the wet asphalt as Todd took the corners too fast. The Ferrari was right on our bumper. Vanessa driving like a professional stuntman fueled by pure panic. 15 minutes, Todd shouted. "We are going to make it. We are going to make it." I watched the familiar trees whip past the stone walls, the gates of the neighbors' houses. My heart rate remained steady. I was the eye of the storm, Todd. "Keep your eyes on the road," cautioned as he checked his phone again, probably looking for a message from the bank or Sal. "I got this," he yelled. "I got this." We skidded around the final turn, and the iron gates of our estate came into view. They were closed. "Open them," Todd screamed, hitting the button on his sun visor. Nothing happened. "The power," I said calmly. I might have had the power company cut the main line to the gate. When I left security precaution, Todd cursed, screaming words that would make a sailor blush. He slammed the car into park and jumped out, running to the keypad, punching in the code over and over again. "It is dead," he shrieked. "It is dead." Vanessa pulled up behind us, jumping out of the Ferrari, leaving the door open. She yelled at him. "Ram the gate, Todd." He looked at the gate, then at the Range Rover. "It is reinforced steel," he said. "It will total the car." "Who cares about the car?" Vanessa screamed. "Buy a new one, just get us inside." Todd ran back to the SUV, his eyes wild. "Hold on, Bernie," he yelled. He threw the car into drive and stomped on the gas. I braced myself, grabbing the dashboard handle. The collision was loud, a crunch of metal and shattering glass. The airbag did not deploy, thank God, because we were not going fast enough, but the impact jarred my teeth. The heavy iron gates groaned and bent, the lock snapping with a loud pop. They swung open, scraping against the sides of the car. Todd did not stop to check the damage. He drove through the wreckage, the hood of the Range Rover crumpled, steam rising from the radiator. We raced up the long driveway, the house looming ahead of us, dark and imposing in the storm. 1:58 p.m. Todd shouted, "We made it! We made it with 16 minutes to spare!" He slammed on the brakes in front of the main entrance, the car skidding on the wet cobblestones, coming to a halt, inches from the front steps. "Get out!" he yelled, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Get out! Get out!" He ran around to my side of the car and threw the door open. He did not wait for me to unbuckle. He reached in and grabbed me, dragging me out of the seat. "Easy, Todd," I warned my leg. "Remember." He did not care. He pulled me out, my feet hitting the ground hard. Vanessa was there, instantly grabbing my other arm. Together, they hauled me up the steps like a sack of potatoes. "Open the door!" Vanessa screamed at Todd. "Open it!" Todd fumbled for his keys, dropping them on the porch. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely pick them up. I stood there, leaning on my cane, watching them. "You know," I said, my voice cutting through their panic, "this door has a digital lock too. Did you bring the physical key?" Todd froze, looking at the keypad, which was dark because the power was out. "No," he whispered. I reached into my pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the heavy brass key I had carried for 20 years. "Good thing I did," I said. I handed the key to Todd. He snatched it from my hand and jammed it into the lock, turning it with a desperate grunt. The mechanism clicked. The heavy door swung inward. They pushed me inside, practically throwing me into the foyer. "You are in," Todd shouted, checking his watch. 2:05 p.m. "You are inside the house. We did it. The trust is safe." Vanessa collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it," she sobbed. "We kept the money." I stood in the center of the foyer, looking around. The air inside was freezing cold, smelling of dampness and neglect. Rain was blowing in through the open door. I looked at the spot where the antique vanity used to be. It was empty, just a rectangle of cleaner marble on the floor. I looked into the living room. It was empty. The furniture was gone, the rugs were gone, the paintings were gone. I looked at the library. The shelves were bare, stripped clean. I turned back to Todd and Vanessa, who were hugging each other on the floor, celebrating their victory. "I told you," I said, my voice echoing in the empty house. They stopped looking up at me. I told you that I wanted my room back exactly the way. It was before you trashed it. Vanessa stood up, wiping her face. Dad, we will buy you new furniture. We will buy you anything you want. Just stay here. I shook my head slowly. This is not my home, I said. This is an empty shell. You threw away my home. You threw away my books, my wife, Sayes things. You threw away the life that lived here. I turned around and started walking back toward the open door. Bernie, where are you going? Todd asked, scrambling to his feet. I am leaving, I said. I am going back to the motel. No, Vanessa screamed, blocking the doorway. You cannot leave. You have to live here. I looked at my watch. It is 2:08 p.m., I said. You have 6 minutes until the deadline. And looking around this place, I said, gesturing to the empty rooms. I do not see my chair. I do not see my bed. I do not see a single reason to stay. Todd looked around the empty foyer, panic rising in his chest again. We can fix it, he said. We can get it back. Then you better hurry, I said, stepping onto the porch, because the garbage truck took it all away yesterday morning, and the dump closes at 3. Vanessa stared at me, her eyes going wide. The dump, she whispered. You have 6 minutes, I said, to find my favorite chair and put it in that living room. Or I am walking down that driveway, and I am never coming back. Run, Vanessa, I said. Run. The steam rising from the crushed hood of the Range Rover was the only warmth in the freezing rain the engine had finally seized, giving up the ghost halfway up the winding driveway. The impact with the iron gate had cracked the radiator, and we had bled out all the coolant, leaving us stranded 300 yards from the front door. The digital clock on the dashboard flickered and died at 1:59 p.m. 15 minutes remaining. Todd slammed his fists against the steering wheel, screaming a curse that tore his throat raw. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought he was going to strangle me right there in the passenger seat, but greed is a powerful leash, and he knew I was worth more alive than dead. Get the chair, he barked at Vanessa, his voice feral. They scrambled out into the storm, slipping on the wet cobblestones. Todd ran to the back of the SUV and yanked the trunk open, dragging out the wheelchair. I had used at the funeral 3 days ago. It hit the ground with a metallic clang. Get in, Todd shouted, opening my door and grabbing my arm. Get in the chair, Bernie. We are running the rest of the way. I did not resist. I let them manhandle me into the seat, enjoying the sheer absurdity of the moment. My daughter in her ruined designer dress and my son-in-law in his soaked Italian suit were about to become mules. They began to push the incline of the driveway. It was steep, a paved hill that led up to the house overlooking the lake. Todd took the handles, pushing with all his might, while Vanessa pulled from the front, her bare feet bleeding on the stones. Faster, Todd yelled, his face purple with exertion. Push, Vanessa, push! I sat back, gripping the armrests, watching the trees pass by overhead. I could have walked. I could have walked faster than they were pushing me, but that was not the point. This was their penance. Suddenly the air was split by the wail of sirens. Blue and red lights flashed at the bottom of the driveway, reflecting off the wet pavement. Police cruisers, 3 of them skidding through the broken gate. Stop, police! A voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed over the sound of the rain. Todd looked back, his eyes wide with terror. Keep going, he screamed at Vanessa. Do not stop, they are chasing us, I said calmly, turning my head slightly. You ran a dozen red lights, Todd, and you smashed a gate. They probably think you kidnapped me. I am not stopping. Todd panted his shoes, slipping on the wet asphalt. We are almost there, just get him inside. The police cars could not pass the wrecked Range Rover, blocking the narrow driveway. Officers were jumping out, guns drawn, running up the hill after us. Halt, police! Drop the wheelchair. Todd ignored them, driving his legs like pistons. Vanessa was sobbing, pulling the front of the chair, her fingernails digging into the metal frame. We reached the top of the hill, the house looming above us, dark and empty. Todd spun the wheelchair around, drifting it on the wet stone, and slammed it against the bottom step of the porch. He did not bother with the ramp. And Vanessa grabbed the frame and hauled me up the stairs, bumping violently over each step, jarring my spine. "Open the door," he screamed at Vanessa. She fumbled with the heavy brass key I had given them, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice. The police were 20 yards away, shouting commands. "Open it!" Todd roared. She jammed the key in and turned it. The door swung open, and they shoved me inside, crossing the threshold with the momentum of a train wreck. Todd kicked the door shut and threw the deadbolt just as a heavy fist pounded on the wood. From the outside, "Police, open up." Todd leaned his back against the door, sliding down to the floor, gasping for air. He looked at his watch, 2:05 p.m. "We made it." He wheezed, a manic grin spreading across his face. "We are inside. You, our resident guardian. Bernie, tell them you live here." I stood up from the wheelchair, slowly stretching my back. I looked around the foyer. It was exactly as I had seen on the monitors, cold, dark, and empty. The marble floor was covered in muddy footprints and water. I walked to the center of the room, the sound of my boots echoing in the hollow space. "Fairfax, tell the police to stand down," I said, speaking to the air, knowing the microphones were listening. Outside, the pounding stopped. I could hear a phone ringing, then a confused conversation Fairfax had made, the call intervening, as the family attorney Vanessa was lying on the floor, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. "We did it," she whispered. "We saved the money." I looked at her, then at the empty space where the antique console table used to be. I walked into the living room, my footsteps heavy. "This place is a tomb," I said. My voice flat. Todd scrambled up and followed me. "What are you talking about? You are here. You are inside the deadline. Ismet, sign the papers. Bernie, just sign the residency affidavit." I looked at the spot by the fireplace, the spot where my leather wingback chair had sat for 15 years, the spot where I smoked my pipe and read my books, the spot where Catherine used to sit across from me knitting. "I do not see my chair," I said. Todd blinked, confused. "What, my chair?" I repeated. "The brown leather one. The one with the scratch on the arm from when Lily was a baby. The one I have sat in every night since 1998. Vanessa stood up, leaning against the doorframe, stumbling slightly. "Dad, we will get you a new chair. We will get you a better chair, made of gold. If you want, just sign the paper." I turned to face them, my expression hard as granite. "This is not a home," I said. "This is a house. You stripped it. You gutted it. You threw away my life like it was garbage. I cannot live here." I checked my watch, 2:08 p.m. "I cannot be the resident guardian of an empty box," I said, walking toward the door. "I am leaving, no!" Todd screamed, blocking my path. "You are not going anywhere." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. "Fairfax," I said into the receiver, "initiate the dissolution protocol. The residence is uninhabitable. The beneficiary has destroyed the contents, and I refuse to occupy the premises." Vanessa let out a shriek that sounded inhuman. "No, Dad, stop, wait." "What do you want?" I asked, lowering the phone. "I will get it," she gasped, her eyes wild. "I will get the chair." I looked at her ruined dress, her bleeding feet, her desperate eyes. "The dump closes at 3, I said, checking my watch again. "But the garbage trucks usually compact the load around 2:30. You might be able to find it if it has not been crushed yet." Vanessa looked at the door, then at me. "Go," I said. She did not hesitate. She ripped the door open, ignoring the police officers standing on the porch, and sprinted into the rain, running toward the Ferrari, parked at the bottom of the hill. Todd watched her go, then looked at me with pure hatred. "You are enjoying this," he whispered. I looked at the empty spot by the fire. "I am not enjoying anything." "Todd," I said, "I am just teaching you the difference between price and value. You know the price of everything in this house, but you valued none of it." I walked over to the window, watching Vanessa's red sports car fishtail down the driveway, nearly hitting a police cruiser as she sped toward the county dump. 2:14 p.m., I said softly. The deadline passed. Todd's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. His face went slack. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew. "The IRS," he whispered. "It is a notification of a tax lien, $22 million. I nodded, turning back to the window. "Looks like you are going to need a job, Todd," I said. "I hear the dump is hiring." The rain at the county dump was not the cleansing kind. It was a slurry of gray water and industrial runoff that turned the ground into a toxic swamp. Vanessa skidded the $300,000 Ferrari to a halt near the gate, ignoring the security guard waving his arms. She did not even put the car in park properly. She just leaped out, leaving the driver's door open to the deluge. Her white dress was already a ruin of mud and grease, but she did not care. She was running on pure adrenaline and the terror of a $22 million debt. I was not there to see it, but Fairfax had tapped into the municipal security feeds, so I watched it all on my phone while Todd paced circles around me in the empty foyer of the lake house. She ran toward the compactor zone, screaming at the workers in their yellow vests. "Stop!" she shrieked, her voice raw, tearing at her throat. "The machines." A large man operating a bulldozer looked down at this hysterical woman in a soaking wet cocktail dress, barefoot and bleeding, running across mounds of garbage like a woman possessed. "My chair!" she screamed, scrambling up a pile of black trash bags, slipping and falling face first into something that looked like rotting insulation. She gagged, retching violently, but she scrambled back up, clawing her way toward the center of the heap, where the morning SS collection from the north side was waiting to be crushed. I saw it. I saw the leg of the wingback chair sticking out from under a broken mattress. It was upside down, the leather stained with coffee grounds. "And God knows what else there!" she yelled, pointing frantic. "Help me get it out." The worker just stared at her, shaking his head. "Lady, you cannot be up there. It is dangerous." "I will pay you," she screamed, plunging her hands into the filth, pulling at the heavy furniture. "I will give you everything I have. Just help me." She grabbed the leg of the chair and pulled, her muscles straining. She was not a strong woman. She had never lifted anything heavier than a shopping bag in her life. But desperation is a powerful fuel. She heaved the chair free. It tumbled down the slope of trash, crashing onto the muddy ground at her feet. It was ruined. The leather was slashed. The wood was gouged. One of the legs was bent at an angle. But it was the chair. Vanessa dragged it across the mud, crying hysterically. She dragged it past the stunned workers, past the mountains of waste, past the security guard who was calling the police. She reached the Ferrari and realized the chair would not fit in the trunk. She did not hesitate. She threw the passenger door open and shoved the filthy, stinking chair onto the hand-stitched Italian leather seat. She pushed and kicked until it was wedged inside the sharp wood, tearing the dashboard. Then she jumped into the driver's seat, sitting in her own filth, and slammed on the gas. Back at the house, Todd was watching the clock, his eyes darting between the minute hand and the driveway. 2:12 p.m., he whispered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "She is not going to make it." I sat in the wheelchair in the center of the empty room, perfectly still. "She might," I said, "if she drives fast enough." We heard the roar of the engine before we saw the car. It was a high-pitched whine of a machine being pushed beyond its limits. Vanessa took the final turn into the driveway at 80 miles an hour, the Ferrari fishtailing violently on the wet stones. She smashed through what was left of the iron gate, scraping the entire side of the sports car against the brick pillar, sending sparks flying into the rain. 2:13 p.m., Todd yelled, running to the door. "Come on, Vanessa! Come on!" The car screeched to a halt at the bottom of the steps, smoke rising from the tires. Vanessa jumped out. She did not look human anymore. She was covered in slime, her hair matted with trash, her dress torn to ribbons. She ran to the passenger side and yanked the chair out. It fell onto the driveway with a wet thud. She grabbed the back of it and began to drag it up the stairs, screaming with effort. Each step was a battle, gravity fighting against her greed. "Help me!" she shrieked at Todd. "Do not just stand there! Help me!" Todd ran down and grabbed the legs together. They hauled the ruined chair up the porch steps, banging it against the doorframe, chipping the wood. They dragged it across the threshold, leaving a trail of black sludge on the marble floor. They pushed it into the center of the living room, right in front of the fireplace, exactly where it used to be. Vanessa collapsed on the floor, her chest heaving, gasping for air. She looked up at me, her face streaked with mud and tears, a rictus of triumphant madness. "I did it!" she wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at the chair. I brought it back. "It is here. Sit down, Dad. Sit down and be the guardian." I looked at the chair. It was a disgusting, broken thing. It smelled of decay and neglect. It was a perfect symbol of our relationship. Todd looked at his watch and let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. 2:14 p.m. "On the dot," he shouted. "We made it. We beat the clock. You are resident guardian Bernie. The trust is locked." Vanessa started to laugh too, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. She lay on her back on the dirty floor, spreading her arms wide. "We won," she whispered. "We won." I looked at them both, covered in filth, panting like animals, terrified and triumphant. Then I looked at my watch. I slowly unbuckled the seatbelt of the wheelchair. The click was loud in the echoing room. Todd stopped laughing. He looked at me confused. "What are you doing?" he asked. I placed my hands on the armrests and pushed myself up. I did not struggle. I did not wobble. I stood up straight to my full height of 6'2", stretching my back, hearing my spine crack satisfyingly. I kicked the wheelchair away. It rolled across the floor and hit the wall with a crash. Vanessa sat up, her eyes bulging. "You are walking." I walked over to the chair, my boots clicking on the marble, steady and strong. I looked down at the filth they had dragged. Into my house, I checked my watch again. I held it up so they could see the face. My watch is synchronized with the atomic clock at the Naval Observatory. I said, my voice booming in the silence. "Fairfax S server is linked to the same clock." I tapped the glass as 2:15 p.m. and 12 seconds. I said. Vanessa shook her head. No. Todd said it was 2:14. Todd S watch is fast," I said coldly, and he was too busy celebrating to check the second hand. I looked down at Vanessa. "You were late," as I said. 1 minute late." The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a corpse covered in mud, she whispered. "We brought the chair. We did what you asked." "The protocol is automated," I said, walking around the broken chair, inspecting the damage. "The electronic filing was triggered at 2:14 p.m. and 00 seconds. The trust has been dissolved. The funds have been transferred. The deed to this house is now the property of the Wounded Warrior Project." Todd fell to his knees, pulling at his hair. No. That is $55 million. You cannot just give it away. It is already gone," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the tax notification Fairfax had emailed me 5 minutes ago. "And this," I said, dropping the paper onto Vanessa, "lap is your inheritance." She picked it up, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Notice of immediate tax liability," it read. "Amount due $22,400,000. You owe the government $22 million, I said. "And since you have no assets and no income, and you just destroyed a $300,000 Ferrari transporting a piece of garbage, I suggest you start looking for a very good bankruptcy lawyer." Vanessa looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the realization hit her. She had not just lost the money, she had lost her life. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this to us?" I leaned down, getting close to her face so I could smell the stench of the dump on her skin. "Because you threw me away," I said softly. "You thought I was trash, Vanessa, so I let you dig through the trash to find out who I really am." I straightened up and walked toward the door, moving with the easy stride of a man who had spent his life walking on steel beams high above the ground. "Where are you going?" Todd croaked. "I am going to buy a new chair," I said, without looking back. "And I am going to put it in a house where the locks recognize my face." I walked out into the rain, leaving them sitting on the floor of an empty house with a broken chair and a debt they could never pay. The protocol was complete. I stood over them, my shadow stretching long across the empty living room floor, casting a dark silhouette over my daughter and her husband, who were huddled together like shipwreck survivors on a raft made of garbage. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the sound of the rain still hammering against the roof and the wet, gasping breaths of two people who had just realized their lives were over. Todd looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. He pointed a shaking finger at the tax notice lying on the floor. "You are insane," he croaked, his voice raw from screaming. "You just gave away $55 million to spite us. You burned your own wife's legacy just to hurt me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, dialing Fairfax. One last time I put it on speaker and held it out so they could hear the ringtone echoed in the hollow room. Fairfax, here the lawyer's voice was crisp and satisfied. "It is done," I said. "The deadline passed." "They failed. Excellent, sir," Fairfax replied. "The wire transfer to the charity has been confirmed. The receipt is in your inbox." "Did you hear that?" Todd screamed, scrambling to his knees. "You sick old man, that was Catherine. Money, that was her family's oil money. You had no right to touch it. She earned that." I laughed, a low, dry sound that had no humor in it. "You really did not know, did you?" I asked, looking down at them. "You really thought I was just the hired help who got lucky?" Vanessa wiped sludge from her face, looking at me with confusion. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "Mom was the heiress. You were just a contractor." I shook my head slowly, enjoying the final revelation. "Your mother was a wonderful woman, Vanessa," I said, my voice softening slightly for the first time. "But she was terrible with money. Her family's oil wells ran dry in 1995. She lost the last of her inheritance, making bad investments in the dot-com bubble, before you even finished high school." Vanessa's jaw dropped. "That is a lie," she stammered. "We lived in this house. We had cars. We had vacations. Mom paid for everything." "Mom paid for nothing," I corrected her. I took a step closer, my boots squelching on the wet marble. "I paid for it," I said. "I paid for every dress, every car, every tuition check, and every vacation." Todd looked at me like I had grown a second head. "You," he scoffed. "You built driveways. Bernie, you fixed porches. I built underground command centers for the Department of Defense." "Todd," I said, my voice hard as steel. "I held top-secret clearance for 30 years. I founded the company that reinforced the Pentagon. After 9/11, I sold that company 10 years ago for a sum that would make your bridge loan look like pocket change." I watched the realization slowly dawn on them. The horror of understanding that they had been spitting on the hand that fed them for their entire adult lives. "I funneled my earnings into Catherine Ai's accounts," I explained. "Because she had pride, she wanted to feel like the provider she wanted you to respect. Her and I loved her enough to let her play the part. I let you believe she was the queen, and I was the jester, because it made her happy." I leaned down, getting eye level with Vanessa. "But she is gone now," I whispered, "and the only reason that money was sitting in that trust was because I put it there. I funded my own wife's estate just to make sure she could leave something behind for you." Vanessa started to shake violently, her entire worldview collapsing. "It was your money," she whimpered. "It was all you." "Yes," I said, straightening up. "And when you kicked me out into the rain, when you told me I was useless, you were not just evicting your father. You were evicting the bank." Todd stared at the tax notice on the floor, his mind trying to process the math. "But if you gave it away," he stammered, "why do we owe the taxes?" I smiled a cold, predatory smile. "Because of the structure of the trust, Todd," I said. "Fairfax set it up beautifully. Technically, at the moment of Catherine's death, the assets transferred to the trust with Vanessa as the beneficiary. When the 72-hour clause was violated, the trust did not just vanish. It legally vested the assets to Vanessa for 1 microsecond before seizing them for violation of terms." I pointed at the paper. "In the eyes of the IRS, you inherited $55 million at 2:14 p.m. today, and at 2:14 you lost it due to negligence. But the tax event occurred. The government does not care that you lost the money. They only care that you had it. So you owe $22 million on money. You never got to touch, I said. Vanessa let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She curled into a ball on the floor, clutching her head. This cannot be real, she screamed. This cannot be happening. It is very real, I said. And since you have no job, no assets, and a credit score that is currently in freefall, I imagine the government will be very interested in your future earnings for the rest of your life. Todd looked at me, his eyes looked at me as filled with a pure, unadulterated hatred. I will kill you, he whispered. No, you will not, I said calmly. You are going to jail, Todd. The bank fraud, the identity theft, the loan shark waiting for his 50 grand, you are done. The FBI is probably pulling into the driveway right now to ask you about that bridge loan application. As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. I turned my back on them, walking toward the door, the sound of their sobbing echoing behind me. I pulled out my phone and called Fairfax one last time. Publish the press release, I said. What press release? Vanessa asked, lifting her head. The one announcing the anonymous donation of $55 million to the Wounded Warrior Project, I said, stopping in the doorway. In memory of Catherine Blackwood. It is going to build a lot of rehabilitation centers. It is going to help a lot of people who actually deserve it. I looked back at my daughter one last time, sitting in the filth of her own making. You wanted an inheritance, Vanessa, I said. Well, you got one. You inherited the truth, and the truth is expensive. I walked out of the house and down the steps, past the crushed Ferrari and the approaching police cars. I did not look back. I walked into the rain, which was finally starting to let up, the clouds breaking to reveal a sliver of blue sky. I had no house, I had no wife, and I had no daughter. But I had my dignity, and for the first time in a long time, I was free. The sirens did not stop at the bottom of the driveway. This time they wailed all the way up to the front porch, a cacophony of justice that drowned out the sound of the rain. 3 unmarked black sedans screeched to a halt behind the police cruisers, boxing in the wreckage of the Range Rover. Men in windbreakers emblazoned with federal logos stepped out into the mud, moving with the precision of a strike team. Todd scrambled backward across the marble floor, his heels skidding on the slime he had tracked in. He looked for a way out, but there was nowhere to go. The house he had fought so hard to enter was now his cage. Todd Harrison, a voice boomed from the doorway. It was not a local cop, it was a federal agent, his badge hanging from his neck. Todd froze, his hands trembling in the air. I did not do anything, he squealed, his voice an octave higher than normal. It was a mistake, a banking error. You are under arrest for federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft, the agent said, stepping into the foyer, his gun drawn but pointed at the floor. We have the loan application you signed electronically 2 hours ago, securing funds against assets you did not possess. And we have the recording of you authorizing the transfer of those funds to offshore gambling accounts. They knew everything. Fairfax had not just tipped them off. He had handed them the entire case file wrapped in a bow. Todd looked at me, his eyes pleading for a lifeline, for the bail he knew I could afford. Bernie, tell them. He begged. Tell them I had permission. Tell them you authorized it. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I cannot lie to the feds, Todd, I said calmly. That would be illegal, and unlike you, I try to follow the law. The agents moved in, grabbing Todd by the arms. He tried to twist away, screaming that he was rich, that he could pay them off, which only added attempted bribery to his list of problems. They slammed him against the wall, the thud echoing through the empty house, and then came the sound I had been waiting for, the sharp metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. It was the sound of consequences catching up to ambition. Vanessa stood frozen near the fireplace, watching her husband get dragged out into the rain like a bag of trash. She was shaking her hands, clutching the tax notice I had dropped in her lap. But her nightmare was just beginning. Another agent, a woman with a face like carved stone, walked past. Todd and stopped in front of my daughter. "Vanessa Blackwood?" she asked. Vanessa nodded, mute with terror. The agent handed her a thick envelope sealed with red tape. "This is a formal notice of seizure and a summons to appear from the Internal Revenue Service," the agent said. "Your assets have been frozen pending an investigation into tax evasion and beneficiary negligence regarding the Blackwood estate. Do not try to leave the state. We are monitoring your passport." Vanessa dropped the envelope. It hit the floor with a heavy slap. "But I did not get the money," she whispered. "I did not get anything." "You inherited the liability, Ma," the agent said coldly. "Ignorance of the tax code is not a defense." Outside, the mechanical whine of a heavy winch started up, cutting through the rain. Vanessa ran to the window, her bare feet slipping on the wet floor. "My car!" she screamed. "My car!" We watched as a flatbed tow truck hooked chains onto the front axle of the red Ferrari. The beautiful machine, crumpled and covered in trash from the dump, was dragged unceremoniously up the ramp, the metal scraping and sparking. "No!" Vanessa wailed, banging on the glass. "Stop it, that is mine. I bought that. It is evidence now," the agent said. "And frankly, Ma, I'm looking at the credit card fraud report linked to the down payment." "You never really bought it." Todd was shoved into the back of a federal sedan, his head bowing in defeat. Vanessa was left standing in the empty living room, holding a summons she could not afford to fight, watching her husband go to prison and her luxury car go to the impound lot. She turned to me, her face a mask of absolute ruin. "Daddy, help me," she sobbed, falling to the floor again. "Help me, please." I looked at her, at the daughter who had evicted me 3 days ago. "I cannot help you, Vanessa," I said, walking toward the door. "The only person who can help you now is a very cheap public defender." I walked out onto the porch, past the federal agents, who nodded at me respectfully. I watched the convoy of cars drive away, leaving deep ruts in the muddy lawn. The house was silent. The money was gone and the rats had been cleared out. It was finally time to clean up. The bank auction was a quiet affair, held in a sterile gray conference room downtown. Not at the lake house, Vanessa's assets were being liquidated faster than ice melting on a sidewalk to pay off a fraction of her tax debt to the IRS. The crown jewel, the estate on Lakeview Drive, was listed as a distressed property, finding a buyer for a house that had been the scene of a federal raid and a highly publicized family implosion. Was difficult. Most investors stayed away, thinking it was cursed by bad karma or structural issues caused by a vengeful daughter driving a Ferrari through the gate. I sat in the back row, wearing a new suit and holding paddle number 42. The auctioneer started the bidding, low. Surprisingly low. The bank just wanted to get it off their books to recoup the losses from Todd's fraudulent loan sold for $400,000. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, looking bored. I wrote the check from my personal account, the one I had built over 30 years of government contracts. Not the oil money that never existed. It was a fraction of what the house was worth. But it was the price of a clean slate. I picked up the deed, a piece of paper that weighed less than a feather, but carried the weight of a kingdom. I drove to the house an hour later. The sun was shining, reflecting off the lake in a way that finally looked peaceful instead of cold. Lily was waiting by the repaired gate, standing next to her old Honda Civic, which I had retrieved from the impound lot and paid off. She looked different. Lighter, the bruises on her face had faded, but the steel in her eyes was new. She had grown up fast in the last month, shedding the naivety of childhood, like a snake sheds old skin. "Grandpa," she said, looking at the house. "It looks so big." I stood beside her, leaning on my cane, looking at the fortress I had built with my own hands. "It is just bricks and mortar." "Lily," I said, handing her a thick manila envelope. "What matters is who holds the keys and who controls the locks." She opened the envelope and pulled out the deed, reading the legal text, her hands trembling slightly. Her name was printed on the top line in bold letters. "Lily Ann Blackwood, sole owner, me," she whispered, looking up at me, her eyes wide with shock. "But Grandpa, this is yours." You built it. I shook my head, smiling for the first time in days. No, kiddo. I bought a cabin up north, a quiet place near the river, good for fishing, and far away from homeowners associations. I do not need a fortress anymore. I have nothing left to hide. I pointed to the house. You do though, I said. You need a place where they cannot touch you, where Todd and Vanessa cannot get in unless you invite them, and I strongly suggest you lose their invitations. This house is in your name, fully paid for. The trust covers the taxes and maintenance until you are 30. It is a sanctuary, Lily. A place to start over without the toxicity that almost drowned us. She looked at the deed, then at the house, seeing it not as a symbol of greed, but as a shield. They can never kick me out, she asked, never. I promised. I changed the locks again. The code is your birthday, and the facial recognition only answers to you. She hugged me tight, burying her face in my shoulder. Thank you, she breathed, not for the house, but for saving me, for believing in me. I watched her walk up the driveway, her head held high. She punched her code into the keypad, and the heavy door swung open. Welcoming her home, she stepped inside the empty foyer, ready to fill it with her own art, her own life free from the poison of her parents. The house finally had a master it deserved. It was exactly 30 days later when the gate intercom buzzed, a harsh electronic sound that cut through the crisp autumn air. I was in the driveway, with Lily mixing a batch of quick-drying concrete to repair the brick pillar Vanessa had smashed with the Ferrari. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the repaired lawn. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the control panel mounted on the stone wall. I pressed the video feed button. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure standing outside the iron bars. It was Vanessa. She did not look like the woman who had worn black silk to her mother's funeral. She was wearing a faded gray uniform that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was gaunt, etched with the exhaustion of someone who had learned what it meant to work double shifts for minimum wage. She was holding a cleaning bucket and a mop, she said into the camera, her voice tinny and distorted. I heard the new owner is looking for staff. I know the house, Dad. I know how to clean the marble. I will do it for cheap, please. I just need a chance. I looked at her image on the small screen, a ghost of the arrogance that had destroyed our family. There was no anger left in me, just a quiet hollowness. The realization that some people have to lose everything to understand the value of anything. I did not speak. I did not offer a lecture or a scolding. I simply reached out with a steady hand and pressed the red button marked Deny. The screen went black, the connection severed. I turned back to Lily, who was watching me with a trowel in her hand, waiting. Who was it? She asked. Nobody. I said, just someone looking for a shortcut. I walked back to the cement mixer, the rhythmic churning sound filling the silence. I poured the thick gray slurry into the mold around the gate post, smoothing it out with the trowel. Watch this. Lily, I said, pointing to the wet concrete. This is the most important part of the build. The foundation. Leaned in, watching intently. If you mix it too thin, it cracks, I explained. If you mix it too thick, it does not settle. You have to get the balance right. You have to be patient, and you have to use honest materials, because if the foundation is weak, the whole house comes down eventually, no matter how pretty the paint is. Like people, she said, looking at the dark screen of the intercom. Exactly like people, I replied. I finished smoothing the surface, wiping the edge of the trowel clean. I looked at the house standing strong against the darkening sky. A fortress built on secrets and saved by truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my playlist until I found the track I wanted. I pressed play, and the smooth, melancholic notes of a saxophone drifted into the evening air, Miles Davis playing Blue and Green. I sat down on the edge of the fountain, closing my eyes, letting the jazz wash over me. The work was done, the house was safe, and the foundation was solid. For the first time in 72 years, I did not have to watch the perimeter fade to black. I spent 40 years building a fortune to protect my family. never realizing that the money was the very poison that would eventually destroy them. I learned the hard way that blood does not make a family, loyalty does. You can buy a house, a car, or even a reputation, but you cannot buy the integrity to stand tall when the world tries to knock you down. True wealth isn't what you leave behind in a will. It's the strength you instill in the ones who actually love you. Build your foundation on truth, and you will never fear the storm. If you believe that Dignidad is worth more than any inheritance, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served.